This gentleman was having trouble with his head gasket, and I run upon this problem myself. And I'll read to you what he said. He said he bought an engine and everything was great for the first few times that I used it. But then I noticed that the engine's revolutions were fluctuating somewhat for a while, and then it would stabilize itself. Shortly after, I noticed a slight knocking noise from the engine. It wasn't much, so I figured that I maybe had not noticed it when I bought the engine. Also, when stopping the engine, I started to notice a small puff of blue smoke coming out of the muffler. I've been adding a few ounces of engine oil almost every time that I had needed to use the tractor. Obviously, it's burning oil, but not leaking it. My garage floor is clean. Yesterday, my wife had to stop cutting the grass because the engine suddenly started to smoke heavily from the muffler. I am worried about the engine knock. I have a gut feeling that this is the cause of the oil burning problem, and that might be more expensive to fix than just replacing the gasket. I don't want to spend a huge amount of money on repairs since we could be moving within a year, and I might not need a riding mower anymore. For these symptoms, can anyone tell me if it's worth repairing, and if yes, what could be the approximate cost? Thank you very much for your help. Yes, the engine is worth repairing, and all it needs is a head gasket, and the head gasket looks like this: a 15.5 horsepower Briggs&Stratton and a 16 horsepower Briggs&Stratton single cylinder overhead valve engine are practically the same. And what is happening is right here in the middle where I've got my cursor moving around. This is where this gasket blows 99 times out of 100. As you can see, head bolt, head bolt, head bolt everywhere. Goes around. This part of it goes around the cylinder, and this part right here goes where the valves are at, and that's where it blows at, is right there, because that's the weak part for this head gasket. As you can see, it's well torqued everywhere else, but in this narrow space between the cylinder wall and the valve walls is very narrow, and they cannot put another bolt there so that you could torque it down. And now let's get back to what he was saying. He said that the revolutions of the engine were fluctuating somewhat. The reason for that was he had just barely cracked, the head gasket had just barely cracked right there. So it's just letting a little bit of oil get through. And the reason why it was getting through is this: when it cracked right there on the exhaust stroke, the exhaust gases came into the to where the valves are located, and then from the valves into the crankcase, and that made the back pressure build up in the crankcase. And when that happened, the oil had to go somewhere, so it pushed it up through the breather pipe into the carburetor. And that's the reason why he had oil in his carburetor. And then on the intake stroke, it would pull oil and gas out of the carburetor into the cylinder and burn it. And the knocking was coming, and the revolutions, you know, where he said it was fluctuating. Well, that was because it was misfiring, because the oil was getting on the spark plug, and it wasn't firing right. And then it would burn it off, and then it would run good for a little while. But then as time proceeded to go on, he said he noticed that small blue puff of smoke was coming out of the muffler. Well, it was getting, he's right, it was burning oil, because of the reasons I just explained. and it was getting worse. So that's the reason why he was seeing the blue puff of smoke coming out of the muffler. And he also said that he noticed that the engine, he was worried about a knock in the engine. Well, the knock again was because oil was getting into the cylinder and being burnt and causing the engine to misfire. That's where his knock was coming from. And it only cost him about $10, and if he's pretty good at doing minor repairs, he can pull the head and put the gasket on, and that will cure his problem. And then, you know, he said right there, you know, yesterday my wife had stopped cutting the grass because the engine suddenly started to smoke heavily from the muffler. That the reason why is because that gasket right there, the crack had gotten bigger, and so it was letting more oil and stuff go into the cylinder to be burnt into the valve place where the valves is at, and then into the crankcase. Then it was pushing more from the gases. You know, it was making that, pushing oil up through the carburetor, up to the carburetor through the breather, and it was sucking more oil in from the carburetor to the cylinder. And it would have finally gotten so bad that he would think that thing was, as it proceeded to the gas proceeded to crack more here and let the gases through, it would finally gotten so bad that that thing would look like it was on fire. And when you see this happening, it's blowing head gaskets on a Briggs&Stratton engine, especially the 15.5 and the 16 horsepower Briggs&Stratton overhead valve. And that is the weakness of that engine right there. You cannot torque it down right in that area. It's real thin there, and as you can see, you just cannot torque it down. So if you start having that problem, and it would have gotten so bad that it would have been spitting oil clean out of the carburetor, flooding the carburetor so bad with oil that it couldn't crank it. So that's the reason why you got that. You figure about $10 for a head gasket, and it takes me about 40 minutes to change it out and everything. And while you're in there, go ahead and adjust your intake and exhaust valves. So if you're taking good care of that engine and keep oil in it like you're supposed to, just replace the head gasket and you'll be good to go again. And be sure to torque it down to the specifications. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this editorial, and I hope that it'll help some of you people out there that have this engine. And now that you know what to look for, you know that it's the head gasket. And 9 times out of 10, it's not the breather stopped up. It's the head gasket that's blowing. That is blowing. Well, thank you, and thank you for watching. Have a good day.